Hi everyone, and welcome to SeaKeepers Voyages of Discovery. I'm your host, Katie, and today we're heading into the heart of the Galapagos Marine Reserve, one of the most biologically rich and inspiring places on Earth. On December 4th, the world will mark Wildlife Conservation Day, a reminder of what's at stake as we fight to protect vulnerable species. Few places embody that urgency more than the Galapagos, where the ocean still tells the story of evolution in motion. This spring, I joined an expedition aboard Good Mood 4, a discovery vessel captained by Olly, a medical doctor, with Angus and Henry, two data scientists passionate about contributing to marine research. Working with marine scientists Dr. Alex Hearn, Sophie Green, and Danielle Armijos, we set out to search for a rarely seen natural phenomenon, a constellation of female whale sharks off the coast of Isla Isabela. Although the whale sharks never appeared, what unfolded instead was a deeply meaningful journey filled with collaboration, curiosity, and connection to one of the most extraordinary marine environments on the planet. This episode is about the power of showing up for science even when nature doesn't follow the script, and how every expedition, seen or unseen, moves us closer to understanding and protecting our ocean's greatest mysteries. Come aboard and meet the team. Thanks for joining, everyone. It's so nice to see you all again. Now, we spent 8 days together on a 37-foot sailboat in the Galapagos Islands with little to no internet service and absolutely no showers. So I think it's fair to say we all felt pretty close by the end of the trip. Today, I want to chat a little bit about why exactly we were in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and why we are, or at least I am, still buzzing about this expedition months later. I want to start with the Lost Boys from Discovery Vessel Good Mood 4. And first things first, where are you all now?
We're currently in Tonga at the moment. We've been cruising around there for a few weeks. Olly was mentioning before, we've had a humpback come past our boat about 20 minutes ago. It's a big mother humpbacker and her calf in about sort of 10 meters of water, just cruised past our boat. That was pretty special.
Oh, that's amazing. So, Olly, what motivated you to buy a boat, convince the buddies to take a year sabbatical from work and sail around the world?
I think it's stemmed from a few different things. I read a book when I was 17 about a surfer who all around Indonesia had explored new waves on a sailing boat. And subsequently afterwards, I was then on holiday on a surf trip and a bunch of guys jumped in the water off a sailing boat that they'd sailed up from Australia. I just thought, wow, I have to do that at some point. I've also always, since I've been really young, been fascinated with science and marine biology and the idea of being able to see a lot of the wonders of the world before, well, fingers crossed, things don't deteriorate anymore. But I think realistically, with coral bleaching and everything, there's some amazing places in the world that might not be the same in my lifetime. And I think that definitely spurred me on to try and get to some of these remote places to see these things and experience them. Following that, I think just trying to get these two involved was not particularly difficult. I think I just had to raise the idea and they was keen as anything to come on board. So the idea, I think, has been in my head for a long time, and then just over a few years, it snowballed and here we are.
That sounds like the trip of a lifetime for all of you. So not only have you gotten to interact with the marine environments, but in this particular expedition, you brought some scientists on board. Angus, why did you all decide to host scientists on your vessel for a trip to the Galapagos, and what were you hoping to get out of it?
It was just too good of an opportunity to pass up, really. The possibility to have some researchers come on board and share their knowledge was amazing. The possibility to go to some sort of really remote locations that people aren't usually allowed to go to and experience them was something that really excited us. So yeah, I think it was just an opportunity that we couldn't miss.
We'll dive into that a little bit more too, but Henry, I want to ask, first of all, how you all know each other, why you decided to join, and then what kind of a typical day on Good Mood 4 looks like as you're traveling from the UK to Australia. Is that right?
Yeah, so we all met at university. It would have been about 10 years ago now. Since we all met, we've enjoyed doing these sorts of trips together. And I guess we're all into adventure and exploring and seeing the natural world, seeing the marine world. And that's what this trip stemmed out of. On this trip, I think there's been a few different stages. So we obviously started in Europe. And maybe there was more time in marinas and exploring cities. And then we got into the Caribbean stage, lush Caribbean islands, living in anchorages, exploring the reefs, a little bit of surfing when you could. So there's that kind of side of it, the anchor side. And then there's also the crossings as well, which there's shifts and checking the weather and the sails. And I think we've done a quarter of this year at sea, quite a lot of time with that, just staring out the blue and plodding on ahead to your destination. A lot of time actually just getting the boat ready as well. So we had about a month in Panama before we set off into the Pacific, where there's a million jobs. So we've got not the newest boat in the world, so there's always something to do, something to fix. So that's a big part of the year as well.
Yeah, it was funny when I was on board, all of us, there were technical difficulties that you just take as they come. And we learned that was part of the glamorous lifestyle of living on a boat. Olly, I want to ask, I guess all of you Lost Boys, what you thought or what you think so far your favorite destination has been that you've experienced on this trip.
Particularly in the last 5 months, really, as soon as we've gone through the Panama Canal, I think things have just rocketed up in amazingness. So we've had, obviously, going through the Panama Canal, we went first to the Galapagos, which was just out of this world. It was such an amazing experience. We've seen so many species and different forms of wildlife that I'd always wanted to see. So that was amazing. And then going from the Galapagos, we then landed in the Marquesas Islands, which were so remote, so beautiful. It looked like something out of a movie. And the marine life there was also amazing. We had some great diving down walls, met some lovely people, beautiful walks with waterfalls and lush green forests just descending down into the ocean. So I reckon that's pretty high up on my list. An island called Fatahillo in the Marquesas. That was pretty cool, but it's very difficult to pick apart because they've all been amazing so far. I don't know what these guys think.
Tonga, with all the whales around us at the moment, is definitely starting to seem up there. Just humpbacks everywhere you look.
That's incredible. It sounds like the Galapagos really set you guys up for a great latter half of your journey that you've done so far, because it's about a year long that you'll be sailing total.
Yeah, exactly. So we set off in September and we're looking to get to Sydney in about mid-October, just over a year. But yeah, the Galapagos has been an amazing springboard to the rest of the South Pacific. And it was such an awesome experience. We're still thinking about it and looking through the photos now.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so I want to chat a little bit about the Galapagos, starting with Alex. You're the shark guy of the Galapagos. You're very well known in the scientific community for your research expertise and your work with all different sorts of sharks. Unfortunately, you weren't able to join us on this particular expedition because you were teaching, but you really helped us get set up. You helped the science happen on board, and we all got to meet before and after the trip in San Cristobal to kind of plan and debrief. How did you decide to become a marine scientist in one of the most remote places in the world?
A lot of that has to do with luck. And yeah, I love teaching, but oh boy, this was a tough few days knowing that Danielle was out there with you guys and I was stuck in a classroom. But luckily, we have a great team. We all muck in. And the idea is that anyone can fill in for anyone else if need be. So that's the way we get our work done. I've always wanted to be a marine biologist. Well, maybe not. There was a while where I wanted to be an ornithologist. I'm a failed ornithologist turned marine biologist. So growing up, hearing about people like Sylvia Earle and Jacques Cousteau, and it sounds pretty rote, to be honest with you. But yeah, I studied marine biology in Southampton and never looked back. I ended up in Galapagos almost by accident. Marine biology and oceanography are very difficult careers. I'd finished my PhD. I was at that point in my career where you're overqualified and underexperienced, which no one really ever prepares you for. And I've been applying for jobs all over the place. And the only offer I got was teaching English in China. I had done a lot of English teaching, but I felt I hadn't prepared myself for all these years to go back to teaching English. And then I had an opportunity to come to Galapagos for 6 months as a volunteer. So I thought, well, those are the options on the table. It's a no-brainer. Came to Galapagos for 6 months. 23 years later, I'm still there. So there's a lesson there. Sometimes it's a good idea to take a step back to go forward.
And luckily for you, the biodiversity of birds in the Galapagos is unbelievable. That's not even what we were there to study. And we had so much fun learning about all the different species and watching them all. It was amazing.
Still get a bit of bird watching in, even at sea.
Yeah, absolutely. Sophie, you are an Ecuadorian marine biologist, and you grew up with the Galapagos kind of as your backyard and your playground. What inspired you to study what we're here to talk about today, which is whale sharks?
Galapagos always felt like my second home. I grew up more in the highlands, but Galapagos was the place where my parents worked as guides and as biologists and as scientists. So they always brought us up in this environment where Galapagos was talked about every single day, at the dining room table. And we were seeing about how it was changing. Even in my own lifetime, I saw how colonies of boobies by urban areas started disappearing. And so when I went to university, I knew I wanted to do something outdoors. I was always an outdoors kind of person. So I thought, I'll study, equestrian sciences. I want to save abused and damaged horses. And I started off with that. Midway through my career, I was still very much involved with the Galapagos. And I kept seeing all these changes and I kept reading about climate change. And I thought, no, I love horses. They're always going to be part of my life, but I need to be part of making this world a better place and making sure that we preserve Galapagos for the future. And it's this one place in the world that is still almost pristine. It's spectacular. The wildlife you find there is not found anywhere else in the world. So I want to study biology to make sure that I can protect the Galapagos Islands. So I switched careers and did so, and then was really lucky. I managed to return to the islands and volunteer as Alex started as well. And from there, just got different opportunities to join some projects with marine invasive species, teaching the naturalist guides, and then found the Galapagos Whale Shark Project. And it's been amazing since.
Can you give us a little bit of background about the Galapagos Whale Shark Project?
This is a project started by Alex and my father. Back in the 1990s, basically, nobody used to dive in the far northern islands of the Galapagos. When the first dive expeditions went out there, my dad was on board some of those first expeditions, and they started seeing whale sharks. They found this animal that they didn't know was there seasonally. Nobody knew anything about them, started asking around, and it was like, well, it might be 2 or 3 individuals. It might not be constant. The more they went into this, they realized actually there may be more to it than we are actually understanding. So that's when they created the project, starting with surveys in the 1990s, but then officially created the Galapagos Whale Shark Project in 2011. I was lucky to join it in 2017 as a volunteer. Realized whale sharks are fantastic ocean ambassadors. By protecting the whale shark, you get to protect the ocean as an ecosystem. So I thought that is amazing. And I fell in love with this amazing, spotty, beautiful shark and thought that is my way into ocean conservation. I went and then got a master's degree to make sure I could be the best I could for this project.
Alex, for those who don't know what whale sharks are, can you try to describe them and what it's like to be in the water with them?
Well, imagine going down into the water. It gets murkier and bluer. You're surrounded by hammerhead sharks and Pacific Creole fish. And then suddenly you just feel something and turn, and out of nowhere, this enormous truck-sized animal appears. And your mind plays tricks on you because you feel like there must be some kind of rumbling involved. There's no way an animal that big can appear out of nowhere, but they materialize because of their spots. As a camouflage, it breaks out their image. So you don't see them, and suddenly you've got this thing in front of you. And Galapagos is pretty unique with whale sharks because it's the only site in the world where, as an aggregation site, we see almost all adults and almost all females. Most places, whale sharks tend to be solitary, but they aggregate in certain parts of the world to feed. But it's mostly immature whale sharks, so 4 to 6 meters. These things that we get here are 10 to 12 meters long. I mean, they're huge. I guess they don't really care too much about humans being around them, at least when we're in Darwin on scuba. The currents are very strong, so it's not like our interactions are very long. So I don't think they've habituated in a bad way to humans. I don't think humans have had much of an opportunity to be a threat to them. So it's still that indescribable experience of having this enormous, gentle giant come towards you. And they're the biggest fish in the sea, biggest fish on the planet.
Olly, Angus, and Henry, have you all yet had the opportunity to swim with a whale shark or to see one on your travels?
Not with the whale shark, sadly. Obviously, the aim of the trip that we did was to try and find this aggregation, and we were hoping to assist Sophie getting in the water and tagging the whale sharks. But alas, we didn't find them. You never know. We've still got some time left to see some whale sharks, and we've been really lucky to swim with some other gentle giants along the way. So we're not short of really amazing wildlife experiences.
Well, hopefully we can all reunite in the Galapagos someday and tag some whale sharks. But Sophie, can you describe a little bit about, we mentioned we didn't find the whale sharks on this expedition. The goal was to find what you referred to as a constellation of female whale sharks. Can you describe what a constellation is and how it might still be valuable even if we didn't see the whale sharks for us to go out and take the samples and record the data that we did?
Absolutely. So this was an amazing opportunity for us. One of the biggest challenges for scientists is finding the funding to go out and carry out our research. To be able to go out in this amazing platforms, SeaKeepers connecting us with the Lost Boys with a good mood vessel, and having the opportunity to go out to a remote area in the archipelago to look for whale sharks in an area where we haven't sighted them before and haven't worked with them before was, pretty spectacular. So what we were trying to do is we've been studying the whale sharks up at Darwin Island in the far northern region of the Galapagos for over a decade now. We know where to find them seasonally when they're going to be there. But recently we've had anecdotal reports of this big aggregation or constellation of whale sharks in the southwestern side of Isabella Island. So what is a constellation? That's just what we call a big group of whale sharks because they have this beautiful starry pattern on their skin. So a big group of whale sharks is known as a constellation. So hearing that there is this anecdotal report of this constellation of whale sharks in the western side of the archipelago at the opposite time of the year when we've been studying them, for us is a unique opportunity to find out, okay, how are they using the Galapagos environment year round? And are they using it in the same manner as they're using it in the north? In the north, we see no feeding behavior. But over here, there's a lot more upwelling, it's cooler waters. Could they be feeding? Is this the first aggregation of adults feeding somewhere in the world that we can actually go and find? So this was a unique opportunity. We're still not quite sure what time of the year they're present in this area, since all we've had so far are some reports from fishermen, park rangers, national park guides. So we still have to get out there and find them ourselves. We managed to link up thanks to SeaKeepers, and we link up with the Lost Boys in the Good Mood vessel. We went out there in April, and we spent about a week out there searching for them in the area where they've been reported. It's interesting because these reports all happen at crepuscular hours. So it's not an easy working time either. During the day, we spent most of our time doing other scientific work with bruvs and then making sure that the Lost Boys also got some flavor of Galapagos, so some cormorants, some penguins. We're always keeping an eye out for whale sharks. But once the sun started setting, that's when, okay, we kicked into work mode, everyone eyes on the horizon. We even tried having like a flashlight out, even after the light went out, after the sun left us, to see if we could find whale sharks in this area. Unfortunately, the full week that we were out there in April, we did not find them. But this is still news. This is still good reporting for us. To be out there and not find them gives us information that they may not be out there during this time of the year. So what we need to do is just keep trying and keep getting opportunities like this to spend as much time as possible out in the ocean in this area of the Galapagos to finally find this incredible constellation of whale sharks in the southwestern side of the archipelago.
Hopefully we can keep getting you guys out on the water to different parts of the Galapagos all around the year to really figure out when these whale sharks are congregating. While we were on the expedition, we were getting texts from Alex saying, hey, this fisherman told us that there was a sighting of a whale shark at this island. And something most people might not know about the Galapagos is that the islands are actually very far apart. So it takes a while. We couldn't just zip on over to a different island and go look for this whale shark. But Alex, that was something that was so unique and really beautiful, was this relationship that you all have with the fishing community in the Galapagos. Can you speak a little bit to that and how that's been beneficial for your research?
Just to comment also on some of the things about Galapagos. When you're on the equator, when Sophie was saying now about having those crepuscular hours to work, that is a really short window where we are. It's daytime and then the sun drops. There's no real evening to speak of. We're very limited. And Galapagos has a funny way of rewarding effort. None of the work that we do is easy. We fail most of the time. And the idea is that to date, if we fail enough, Galapagos eventually takes pity on us and gives us a bit of a reward. So that's our relationship with the Galapagos Ocean. And I think probably many people in Galapagos would feel the same way, including the fishing community. One of the things that makes Galapagos special is that it was originally uninhabited. It was only discovered 1535 by accident on a boat that becalmed and drifted out, heading down to Lima to resolve a dispute amongst the conquistadors. The crew and a bishop that was aboard ended up in these islands that they thought was hell on earth. There were these black dragons, very inhospitable rocky shores, and not a lot of fresh water. Luckily, I guess Spain didn't even bother taking possession of the islands originally. So when Ecuador became a nation and saw that other countries have these colonies, they thought, well, we should take Galapagos. And probably the best decision they ever made. Originally, Galapagos was used often as a penal colony. There were several failed attempts to colonize it. Some of them actually in the movies right now, I think, with Ana de Armas. So we've become an A-list location at the moment. But the recent population, really since about the 60s, the population has grown from about 4,000 in 1980 to about 30,000 now. And there is fishing in Galapagos. It's a multi-use marine reserve, but it's not industrial fishing. So from 98, when the marine reserve was created, industrial fishing was excluded and local fishermen were given exclusive rights. And the idea is that this fishing should be artisanal. But when we say artisanal, please don't think it's a guy in a little boat rowing for subsistence. It is commercial fishing. A lot of fish is exported from Galapagos. And the fishing community, I would say a part of them realize that their own long-term economic success depends on a healthy ecosystem. So we work with fishermen who are basically innovators. One of the fishermen we work with most is piloting a traceability system. So when he sells his product, the people who buy it can actually see on a QR code and scan it, see the fish come out of the water, see what kind of fishing gear he uses, and watch that if there is something caught that's not wanted, how it gets released back in the water. And those are the kind of things that we're trying to promote in Galapagos, that we can be responsible users of our resources and help with the conservation of the islands at the same time. It's not always easy. Not everyone is on board with this, but it's a process that I think we've seen over the last 20 years that we're moving towards.
I thought that was a really cool way to work with the fishing community and have them let you know when they've seen whale sharks and in turn are trying to be sustainable for the environment that you all are working so hard to protect.
A lot of fishermen now are divers, they dive for lobsters or sea cucumbers, and in our conversations, they get excited about this too, because there's something very exciting about new knowledge. There's something very exciting about telling someone something or giving someone some information that's exciting and new. There's something addictive about that. People love it. And so with all these WhatsApp groups and things, people are always keen to share these experiences, and it makes for a more enriching community. So we're all for it. We love it.
Yeah, I thought the sense of community in the Galapagos was really beautiful. Lost Boys, did you all find that too? The sense of community in the Galapagos when we did get to go, occasionally on land?
For sure. Going around with Alex, you kind of seems to know every second person, and there seems to be this community of scientists all interacting and sharing the stuff they're working on and being really excited about it. Is cool to see. Just walking around that university, yeah.
I think as well, a lot of people think about the Galapagos and think about all the wildlife, but you definitely don't necessarily think about that there's actually established towns there and a university with such a lovely atmosphere. It added a lot to the trip.
We had Daniel on board from one of Alex's colleagues to come and do some work for him, general shark sampling, while you were not able to join. So that was amazing. And we also had a naturalist, Lourdes, on board. Sophie, can you explain why it was helpful to have the two of them on board, and especially what the purpose of having a naturalist on board is?
Whilst we were out there, we better make the most of our time out there. So it was incredible having Daniel on board. He was working with BRUVs. The BRUVs are these incredible systems to put baited underwater setups with cameras so that we can attract sharks and predators to the cameras to see what's out there when we're not underwater. So you put in some baits, put in these cameras down, and then record everything that passes by. So that's what we were doing during the day. That's what Daniel was in charge of managing. So we were tracking to see what was around in the area whilst we were sailing around. And then having Lourdes. Lourdes is the national park ranger. And so the Galapagos National Park is always very much involved in the research that is going on in the islands. This is really good because they're making sure that they're protecting Galapagos in so many ways. So they're controlling who's doing science out there, how is this science being done, what kind of fishing is being carried out in the reserve, where are you allowed to do tourism, where are you allowed to do research, where are you allowed to do science. So it's like Alex said, this is a multi-use marine protected area. It's just the national park is always analyzing how do we make sure that all these different parts work together and we can still protect this beautiful environment. So that's what the National Park Guide is always doing on board with us, is making sure that everyone is doing their job properly and that we're going to the right places.
We learned so much from them and from you, Sophie, just about the Galapagos in general, about all the biodiversity we saw. We saw so many species that I guess I didn't know that much about the Galapagos, so I was really surprised. I want to ask the Lost Boys, what did you see and what did Sophie help teach you about that really surprised you and that you weren't expecting to see in the Galapagos?
I think for me, the thing that was most surprising to see were the penguins, and were very exciting to see them in such a seemingly unnatural environment, so far from where you'd expect to see them, and to be able to interact with them and swim with them was really special.
What about you, Henry?
The sharks and the Galapagos are definitely the thing you go to see. I think we managed to do a dive at Kicker Rock and seeing the hammerheads, and got the big black tips, and there was this massive bait ball that we were swimming through, and seeing the sea lions and the sharks all moving through that, the sky being blocked out, was pretty amazing. And just the sheer quantity of life there all teeming about was pretty insane. Getting to see some of the more remote areas, penguins knocking about on volcanic rock, was pretty unique as well to see.
It's a very interesting contrast to see the penguins on these really remote, not tropical, but when we were there, they were very lush and green. I think it had been a particularly rainy season, so it was really cool to see the contrast there. Ollie, did anything in particular stand out to you?
It's a classic one, but blue-footed boobies. They are just the most absurd birds you've ever seen. They have iridescent blue feet. They're everywhere, but I absolutely loved them. I think they're just the coolest things.
We had a few join us on our expedition across the Pacific, so built a special bond with them. They lived on the front of the boat for quite a while.
Yeah, that was amazing. They would sit on the pulpit of the boat, and they were using it as a perch, I think, to hunt and get all the flying fish, and then come back and then destroy the deck of the boat with all of the birds.
Yeah, slightly ruined the relationship a bit, that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Sophie, I want to ask, is there any reason why the Galapagos is so unique in its biodiversity and why we find so many unique animals there that you can't really find anywhere else?
So the Galapagos is just lucky. It has a lucky placement on the Earth. So it is right on the equator, but we have a system of currents that make it so special. In the Galapagos, you would expect to find this tropical place like the boys have now seen in the other side of the Pacific. Green, lush waterfalls. People expect coconut trees, and that's not what you get. You arrive to this arid environment with lava rocks. It's beautiful. You see the formation of planet Earth when you arrive to the Galapagos. And there you get this current that comes from the north, from Panama, basically. It's called the Panama Current that brings in warm waters. Then from the south of South America, you bring this other current. There's the Humboldt Current that brings cold waters all the way from Antarctica, coming up Chile, up Peru, up Ecuador, mainland Ecuador, and into the Galapagos Islands, bringing really cold, nutrient-rich water. And then these together join forces and come into the islands. But then we have a subcurrent called the Cromwell Current that clashes from the depths into the Galapagos platform from the west, and also brings extremely cold, nutrient-rich water. So the mix of these hot waters plus these nutrients just creates this incredible ecosystem where we have species from Peru, species from the Indo-Pacific, species from warm environments. So it's wild. In the same archipelago, you can be looking at fur seals and albatrosses that come from colder environments and penguins, and then you see flamingos from the Caribbean. So it's kind of mind-blowing to see all of this in the same environment. So yeah, definitely a unique place. So we don't have this wild biodiversity as you would see maybe if you go to the Amazon, but instead the species that you see in the Galapagos are unique and have found this very, very different environment where they have adapted and they just become their own species, which is pretty spectacular.
It felt almost like another world to be there with all of these different species that you would expect to find in such different locations. So just that alone absolutely makes worth going to the Galapagos. Alex, I want to ask, do these currents play any particular role for the shark communities in the Galapagos?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And in particular for whale sharks, the South Equatorial Current, which is what Sophie was saying, these two currents that join and then start throwing west. Just north of that, there's a counter current that comes back. And when two currents slide past each other, you get these tropical instability waves. And what we found is that the whale sharks that we've tracked from Darwin tracked the tropical instability waves. Originally, we started looking at this as kind of annual averages, and it seemed that they were loosely associated. But once you start looking at 3-day data sets, you can see they're actually tracking inside the tropical instability waves. And if you think about it, they're plankton feeders. And if you're a plankton feeder, where would you want to be to get the best amount of food? So if you've got a bowl of coffee or something and you're stirring it, all the particles are going to go into the middle. So that's where you get the concentration of food. So absolutely, this western drift affects the whale sharks. Hammerheads have seasonal migrations as well. We're on the equator. Why is he talking about seasons? It's the relative strength of those two currents driving the seasons. Some of our sharks are seasonal. Some of them are not. We've got sharks that are reef sharks that don't move around more than a few hundred meters. And then we have these ocean wanderers that join us too. So yeah, there's over 35 species of sharks in Galapagos. It's incredible.
Out of all of those different species, what is your favorite in particular to study if you had to pick?
I have to say I do like the whale shark because it's fascinating and frustrating at the same time. It has proved us wrong on pretty much every single thing we thought we knew about it. And I love that as a scientist. It would have to be a toss-up between the whale shark and the smooth hammerhead, which we only recently rediscovered out west where you guys were. It hadn't been seen for 20 years. It'd been living quietly there under everyone's nose. Kind of everyone was mistaking it for a scalloped hammerhead.
Oh, that is amazing. So what helped lead to the distinction between the scalloped hammerhead and the smooth hammerhead recently?
This is another example of why we need eyes on the water. Unless you have eyes on the water, these things aren't going to happen. It was an accident. Our ship broke down and we had to request permission to anchor in a bay. And we went off, and one of my students reported when we got back to the boat, we'd been checking stuff out. She said, oh, there's hammerhead pups under the boat. We thought, well, that's a bit weird. It's not hammerhead thinking scalloped hammerheads. It's not hammerhead habitat for a nursery ground. And she said, oh, I've got some photos. And we started looking at the photo. And hang on a minute, there's something wrong with its head. And then we realized it was a smooth hammerhead, and there were more and more of them. This was an El Nino event, which is a climatic event that we get where the waters are extra warm and it's extra rainy. I think that was what was happening when you guys were there. So we weren't sure whether this was just because it was an El Nino event, the sharks had moved in, but we've since gone back and found them again at the same spot. And we're now working them and trying to understand a little bit about why they use that area. And it looks like they've divvied up the Galapagos Islands between the two species. So the scalloped hammerheads get Darwin and Wolf on the main islands, and the smooth hammerhead gets the west. It's something along those lines. But anyway, we're still researching them.
I love that you found them by accident. That is a really cool story and a true testament to the life of a marine biologist. Sophie, I want to do a little bit of a shameless plug. I learned recently that you starred in a documentary called Her Shark Story, all about your experience with the whale sharks and growing up with them. Can you tell us a little bit about that film?
I'm still not sure how to speak of it because I never ever thought I'd have a documentary made about my life. I still find it a little strange, but it was an opportunity that arose a few years back when I was getting my master's. Got this email from a Chilean producer saying, hey, I've been told I was looking for this story of somebody that has a close connection with nature, and I want to share more of a personal story so that people start connecting with nature and the ocean through a human story rather than the typical nature story that is beautiful. Like BBC documentaries are spectacular, but only those of us that love nature are watching those documentaries. So he goes, hey, I've been told you study sharks and you have a close relationship with whale sharks, so would we be able to chat? I'm thinking we could make a documentary out of this. And I thought, well, I kind of laughed. I was like, this is really awkward. Like, no. I'm not one that likes spotlights and stuff. And I was busy with my master's thesis. So I was like, I'll write back at some point, and completely forgot. Months later, I get a reminder being like, hey, give us a Zoom chat. If you're not interested, you can say no afterwards. So I was like, let's chat. So I went online with this Chilean producer, Ignacio Walker, and he's the nicest guy you'll ever meet on planet Earth. It was so easy chatting with him. And he goes, look, you have this story to share. You're working with your dad studying whale sharks. It's a beautiful story of you reconnecting with your father through this project, we'd love to just chat with you for a year and see what story you can tell us. See if it's worth anything. If you feel comfortable with it, we'll come out and film you guys just doing your thing. You don't have to act, because we were like, we're never going to act. That's not us. And they're like, no, we want it to be as natural as possible. We just want to come out and spend time with you guys. So for a full year, we just had Zoom sessions and it felt like therapy. It was wonderful. We just became really close. Then he came out and followed us in a few expeditions. We went up to Darwin. That's when we started the work down in the south in Española to find the new aggregation, new constellations. And so he just followed us for a while. And then after 3 years, produced a documentary on this relationship between my dad and I and whale sharks, which is still pretty wild to me.
That's a beautiful story. Where can we tune into the film?
So I'm not sure what's going to happen with the documentary yet. It is currently just going around the world in festivals and seeing what platform might pick it up. So yeah, let's see what happens. But you can follow it on Instagram. It's called Her Shark Story. See where it pops up in the future.
Great. We will definitely be keeping an eye out.
One quick question. We were talking the other day about how a lot of these migratory sharks and things that live submarine, how they actually know where they are. Are they navigating with magnetic fields? When we looked at that map of the whale shark, it was traveling half the ocean. How on earth does it know without they have to pop its head out?
It's a really good question, and the jury's out. But I think the consensus theory is that it has to do with geomagnetism. And there's two types of geomagnetism. So there's the Earth's main field, which is the magnetic north, and they can orient to the main field. But there's also the magnetic anomalies that are caused when you have volcanic activity and all that iron-rich magma solidifies and orients towards the north. So it's no surprise that we get these aggregations at oceanic islands, which basically they're volcanoes and are very iron-rich. So you have a lot of magnetic anomalies there. Some of the original work on hammerhead sharks, actually, by my former boss, was tracking sharks away at night and back again, and they were using the same pathways. How do you do that? And they were subsurface, so they couldn't see the moon, they couldn't see the seabed, and yet he then mapped the magnetic signal of the entire area and found that they were oriented to the areas of high magnetic gradient, which makes sense. If you've got hammerhead, you can detect big differences. So yeah, we think that magnetism has a very big role to play. It's a cool sense. Can you imagine having a magnetic sense?
Yeah, and
Not really.
Cool.
you're pretty useful sailing across oceans, that's for sure.
That was a great question. Now, at the beginning of our chat today, you mentioned something about how whale sharks are kind of this spark for ocean conservation. Can you describe a little bit why your relationship with them is kind of a catalyst for speaking for the oceans in general and for ocean conservation?
Whale sharks serve as this beautiful umbrella species. So they're important in their own ways. First of all, they have their intrinsic right to live, and they're this endangered species that we must protect, that we're seeing that is in constant population decline. In itself, it just is attractive to study this species, try and protect it. Then it's really important economically for coastal communities. I mean, people will travel around the world just to see this beautiful giant shark. It travels around the world, moving nutrients, creating life in areas where we may not have life in the ocean otherwise. But it also serves as an ocean ambassador because it's this big, gentle giant. Sharks and other sharks still have this kind of negative perception in the media, where sometimes people still believe I'd rather have an ocean without sharks, even though an ocean without sharks would pretty much mean no healthy ocean, no healthy earth. Our survival is linked to the survival of sharks. It's as easy as that. But by having this big, cuddly shark that uses huge ocean areas, if people relate more to that shark and we get to protect the ocean areas that are important for the whale shark, we're not only protecting the whale shark, we're protecting other endangered species of sharks, we're protecting species of turtles, marine mammals, and commercially important species like tuna. So it's just a way of working in ocean conservation in a more attractive manner. It's easier for people to be interested in supporting whale shark conservation than maybe other types of research.
They're a very charismatic species, and I am still waiting for the day to see one in person, hopefully soon. We used this anecdote on our expedition together of looking for the whale sharks was like finding a very small needle in a very large haystack. So we spent a lot of hours just scanning the horizon. It ended up being, I thought, very therapeutic. No technology, really nothing to do but look for an abnormality in the water, and that's when we were hoping to see the whale sharks. But we did get to see so many other species of sharks. And I've learned so much about sharks in general in the past few years and just how important they are to our marine ecosystems, pretty much any marine ecosystem anywhere. Olly, I'm really curious if your time at sea over this past year has changed your perspective on sharks and how they interact with humans.
100%. I think being brought up in England, we don't really get much exposure to sharks. For sure, you have that inherent background fear in the back of you when you've ever gone to swim with them. But we've been really lucky, progressively more throughout the trip, to have been able to spearfish alongside them, snorkel with them, and definitely you realise they're actually a lot gentler than they appear and incredibly beautiful to see underwater. One of the spots we went to was the Tuamotu Islands. And there's an island there called Fakarava, which unfortunately we didn't get to go to, but there's a really famous dive there called the Wall of Sharks. We were on an island quite close by, but the quantity of sharks when you'd go down was just absolutely insane. And it was really cool to see an ecosystem thriving like that. And comparing it to other places we'd been to, for example, in the Caribbean, like the Windward Islands and some of the Leeward Islands, we barely saw any at all. It's really sad to see that. I don't know whether they would have had thriving populations like that. Definitely on to the experts for that one. But in comparison, it was complete chalk and cheese. Seeing them underwater like that and experiencing them has definitely, for sure, changed my opinion of sharks and feel much more comfortable around them, and would definitely love to try and spread that amongst other people, given how important they are as a worldwide feeder into the ecosystems.
Henry, we had this moment when we were snorkeling in the Galapagos at one point. We were swimming around these rock areas and you dove down. We saw a few black tip reef sharks, and all of a sudden there must have been maybe 10. You're sitting at the bottom, probably 10 meters down, and all of these black tip reef sharks were just swimming in circles at you. So curious, but I was watching from the surface and it was amazing to see. So what was that like for you?
Pretty cool experience. Like Olly said, I think at the start of the trip, if you told me I'd be doing that, I'd probably be pretty nervous. In that moment, it felt pretty safe, pretty right. And they're just a bit curious a lot of the time, and they just come and check you out and see what you are. Then they just float off. And the more experiences you have, the more you get used to that. And that particular experience was pretty cool. We had loads of turtles around as well. And we were sort of floating around with these tens of reef sharks and turtles all floating around. That was pretty cool.
I'm glad you mentioned the turtles, because at one point we just went for a swim in this cove. We think it was a breeding ground for sea turtles. They were everywhere. So, Angus, can you describe a little bit what that was like?
Yeah, it was amazing just to be swimming around and have such like abundance of turtles. It was really cool to see. I remember the waters were quite murky and we didn't know what we were going to see when we went for a little swim. Saw lots of turtles. I think we might have seen a penguin ashore as well at that time. It was a really cool experience.
Henry, what role do you think expeditions like the one you all hosted with Sophie and Danielle and led by Alex can play in inspiring future marine scientists and conservation efforts?
A really big one. Just looking at this example, it was such a unique experience for us to be able to inhabit this world that Alex and Sophie are in every day, studying these things they're so passionate about, and talking to Alex for sort of 10 minutes, hear about all the things he's involved with, all the schemes he has for conserving and helping the Galapagos. For me, it was personally very inspiring hearing Sophie, and we've had her on this podcast, talk about whale sharks as well, how passionate she is about that. As an outsider, being able to see these things, I think very inspiring. And me personally, I'm potentially considering a career change after this trip is over from this trip, just from seeing how passionate these guys are about what they do. And going forward, if people like us can help and facilitate research, there's researchers waiting to do stuff and things that need to be studied, and there's boats that want to come and see the natural world and help. It'd be great if more boats could be inspired to do that as well and help these guys out, help other researchers around the world.
That's a really beautiful story of being inspired to potentially work with ocean conservation or do something for the oceans after this trip and after you've spent a year at sea. Sophie, what do you hope comes next? We didn't get to see the whale sharks on this expedition, but what is your dream for the whale sharks in the Galapagos and for your research?
It's as Alex mentioned earlier, it's so exciting. We still have so much work to do. We've been studying this species for over a decade, and we still have so many unanswered questions. And we're finding new aggregations in the Galapagos where we've been studying for them for so long. So it's really, really exciting because we're just now going to start and see if we can find this constellation in the western side of the archipelago. We've now sort of found an area where we find them in the south of the archipelago. So we still have to fully understand, okay, what role does the archipelago play for these adult females? As Alex mentioned, we don't really see adult females elsewhere in the world at this ratio. So why are they in the Galapagos? We still haven't been able to figure that one out. Answering that question someday would be fantastic. Just being able to find when they truly are out in the western side of the archipelago, maybe it's a little earlier on the season. Hopefully be out there as much as possible to see when we actually find them and to see also how we can protect them once they leave the Galapagos Marine Reserve. I think that's a really big one because they're protected when they're inside these marine reserves and then they travel maybe up to Cocos Island or Malpelo Island and they're protected once again. But during these migrations, during these movements, they do step out of these protected waters, go out into the high seas. How do we protect them once they've left these protected areas? Working with governments to develop new management strategies and probably change policy. See what happens with the high seas. The high seas are still open for all. And it's still something that as marine biologists, we have an eye on the high seas and think that has to change. So they cannot be this open for all area. So making sure that we have an involvement and making sure that we can protect the high seas in some manner, that's really exciting to me. And we are living in a time of hope. We have bad news all the time about climate change and ocean acidification and coral bleaching and the loss of species. But I think people are starting to realize just how important nature is for our own survival. And we are living in the ocean decade when a lot of governments have promised to protect 30% of the ocean by 2030. So I think it's a good time when policymakers are looking at scientists and saying, okay, you have the data, let us know, what do we need to protect next? And so to be able to have this bridge between the scientists and the governments is really exciting. It's okay, now we have the data, now we can hand it over and say, we know where we need to protect next, or we know what the next steps to follow are. So I do believe we're living in a time of hope.
I love to hear that. And with the High Seas Treaty, we're moving in the right direction. Hopefully we can all come together and make those open ocean spaces safe for migratory species like whale sharks and all the other species that travel through those areas. Alex, I guess I want to know from your end, what is your hope for the Galapagos in particular? What would a beautiful, thriving ecosystem look like?
Well, luckily, it wouldn't look that much different from what it already is. That really is a tribute to how the islands have been managed over the years. I would like to see healthier reefs. We've overexploited a lot of our reef resources, but in a sense, I kind of see Galapagos as a microcosm of planet Earth because you've got these isolated remote islands and a very young human population that are realizing on the go how to live within the limits of what the islands provide to them and making mistakes. And then if you take another step back, you see this blue planet floating through space with a fairly young human population making mistakes and realizing that we have boundaries. So I really see Galapagos potentially as an example. It's a hope spot. If we can get certain things right in Galapagos, we can get maybe things right on the rest of the world. I would, however, say also that I'm a little less hopeful about how politicians are going to address some of the pressing needs of the planet. And to be very frank with you, I think they're doing too little and too slowly. And that's why things like this podcast or these trips or the documentary that Sophie's done is so important, because the only way to get these decisions made is if we, as a society, as the people that vote for these decision makers, hold them to account. They need to be held to account to the global community and not to lobbyists. Anything that we can do in that sense, I think, will give that nudge so that they start waking up. Because at the moment, I know there are encouraging signs, but frankly, it's too little and too slow. This is important.
I think education is one of the most important tools we have to protect our oceans. We need every single person on the planet to care about the oceans and to connect with something. That's why I think whale sharks are such a beautiful species. They're beautiful and huge and charismatic. And in groups, they're referred to as constellations, which is by far the coolest group name of any animal I've ever heard. So I hope that through mediums like this and through Sophie's documentary, we can get people to care about the Galapagos. I also would encourage anyone with a vessel to go and to connect with researchers like Sophie and Alex, to bring them on board, and you'll get the experience of a lifetime that you would never get otherwise. Just to kind of wrap things up, Olly, I want to ask you, after this experience, what message would you want to share with people who are interested in exploring the Galapagos?
As a thing to do, if you're thinking of passing through the Galapagos, it's an absolute no-brainer. It's amazing to be able to contribute to the science that's going on, and hearing from Alex and Sophie, they're always in need of vessels to go out, which seems crazy. You'd think of a marine reserve like the Galapagos, they'd have boats on tap the whole time, but it actually seems a real struggle to find vessels. So if you're passing through, you get the benefit of having all their expertise and being able to go to some amazing parts of the islands and effectively be guided round. And then you're also contributing massively in filling these holes that exist where they don't have enough ships. And there are constantly sailing boats passing through this area. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but we were one of the first sailing pleasure yachts to have had scientists on board. And I think quite often there are logistical issues with the park for having scientists on board. So we seem to have somehow managed to make it work, which means people can in the future. So I couldn't recommend it more.
We absolutely encourage anyone with a vessel to go explore, immerse yourself in the beautiful ecosystem, get connected to SeaKeepers. We can connect you with Sophie and Alex and other researchers in the Galapagos to go explore. But I have a lot of hope for this ecosystem, and I think knowing people like you all are out there exploring and bringing attention to it, that's hopeful. Thank you all so much for joining. It was so nice to have this little reunion. I loved our time on the vessel and in the Galapagos together so much, and I hope that we can all reunite someday in person.
Back in Galapagos.
Yeah, absolutely. Round 2.
That would be amazing. Yes. We get to swim with whale sharks this time.
All right, last boys, you just need to bring your boat back or get another boat. Okay, I think we're all set. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all so much.
That wraps up Season 2 of Voyages of Discovery. We want to thank you for joining us on this journey and for being part of the SeaKeepers community. While we won't be returning with a regular Season 3, our story doesn't end here. Instead, we'll be releasing special one-off episodes throughout the year, spotlighting unique expeditions and remarkable guests who are making an impact in ocean science and conservation. To make sure you don't miss those spotlights, sign up for our newsletter at www.seakeepers.org or follow us at SeaKeepers on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Until next time, thank you for voyaging with SeaKeepers and for helping us protect and explore our oceans.